From pop culture to politics, this is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. There was news today that, well, maybe Bill and Hillary Clinton won't be testifying after all before a congressional committee, or maybe they will be testifying concerning the activities of the late Jeffrey Epstein. What is going on? What is going on with a surprise choice by James Carville, Democratic strategist, for President of the United States? Not someone you would expect Carville necessarily to get behind, but someone who keeps on top of all of this with great intensity and insight is David Drucker, who is a senior writer for The Dispatch. He is a Bloomberg opinion contributing columnist, an MS Now news contributor, and the author of the book In Trump's Shadow. David, always a pleasure speaking with you. With 3 million new documents on the Epstein files, and with reports that Trump's name is mentioned 38,000 times now, how much longer are we going to all be obsessed with this dead pedophile?
How much time you got? It's gonna be a while.
And where does it go?
Well, it's unclear where it goes. You have different people looking for different things, right? For the Republican base, this is a huge issue, and it's a huge issue in part because President Trump said that he was going to get to the bottom of this, and reluctantly, he was sort of forced to help members of Congress get to the bottom of this. Then you have Democrats who, never said much about this, but realized that it was a really salient political issue and one that could drive the president crazy and divide Republicans on the Hill. So they're now involved. And as you mentioned, there are reams and reams of documents. There's so much information to go through. There's now a high level of what I would call not just political interest in this, but sort of pop culture interest. Notwithstanding the horrible crimes that Mr. Epstein committed, that we know of and appears to have committed, and the victims and all the trauma that they've suffered, this is just one of those issues now that I think people who don't pay close attention to politics all the time are interested in learning about.
But in terms of further prosecutions concerning some of the prominent people, including the Clintons and the Trumps, who had associations with Epstein, you're not expecting any new legal breakthroughs or thunderbolts, so are you?
Well, look, I'm not a lawyer, but all of this information came from the Department of Justice. The lawyers and the prosecutors have had this. They haven't moved forward with prosecutions, which would lead one to believe that they don't have a case or didn't believe they had a case that they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I could imagine there could be civil lawsuits, potentially, because there's a much lower threshold for bringing a civil suit. Much like the civil suit brought against President Trump by E. Jean Carroll, right? And he was found liable for sexual assault, I believe, but he wasn't found criminally liable. He was found civilly liable. And so I guess it's possible that we could see civil suits. But again, normally this information never sees the light of day, and for good reason. If they're not going to prosecute you, then they're not supposed to besmirch your character. Now, obviously, this issue and the people that Mr. Epstein was involved with and friends with and, who he socialized with, it took on a life of its own. And both parties decided to, move ahead with this, in part because that's what voters wanted. But this information isn't coming from active prosecutions, because the prosecuting authorities determined already that there was nothing, that however unseemly and unethical this was, there wasn't anything criminal for them to prosecute. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I could be wrong, but that's my first read on this.
Speaking to David Drucker of The Dispatch, And David, you've written a series of interesting pieces on some of the people who are going to play a big role in the future of the two parties. And one of the names that you focused on as someone who is often underestimated as a candidate for president, and that name is Rahm Emanuel. And you point out in your article for the Dispatch that when you look at Rahm Emanuel, who has been a member of Congress, he has been a White House chief of staff, he has been an ambassador, he has been a mayor of Chicago. He has a fairly impressive resume that sets him up for a Democratic run for president, has he not?
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, it's a decent resume. I mean, he hasn't been a U.S. senator, he hasn't been a governor, and he's not world famous. Didn't have his own reality television show. What I think is interesting about Rahm Emanuel is that he does understand politics and he understands voters, and he's willing to say things that may be unpopular in the Democratic Party. And he's willing to say them because he believes that that's how the party gets back to the White House. And we actually had a discussion about this when I was interviewing him, and we were talking about the fact that most of the most of the men elected president of the United States, at least recently, whether Democrat or Republican, were willing to criticize their own party during a primary on something significant. This was true of Barack Obama with the Iraq War and Democrats who had voted to authorize the Iraq War. This was true of Donald Trump for everything. I mean, he criticized basically the entire party platform. This is true, obviously, for Bill Clinton with his Sister Soldier moment, but also other aspects of his campaign. And it's interesting. It was interesting to me that so many candidates in the primary get caught up in trying to satisfy the base and not make anybody angry. Yet it's the people that make some people angry to get elected president, not just nominated. And, what Emmanuel told me was that being able to pick a fight inside the family, as he put it, and I'm leaving out some of the expletives, proves to voters that you have the strength to serve in the Oval Office. And I thought that was an interesting part of our conversation.
It is, and your whole evaluation of Rahm Emanuel was fascinating. You also wrote about the Senator John Cornyn of Texas, who is facing a very tough primary fight against the Attorney General in Texas, and there is yet another candidate. Why is Cornyn, briefly, significant?
Well, I think it's going to have, I think whether or not he can win renomination is going to have a lot to say about the future of the Republican Party in the biggest red state in America, most populous red state in America. Cornyn is a traditional conservative Republican who's actually conservative. And he's a decent legislator at that. You may not agree with his work product, but I mean, he works diligently at his job. Ken Paxton's never met a scandal he didn't like. Adultery, bribery, misuse of public office, and so on. He was impeached by the Texas legislature and nearly removed, although wasn't removed. And
his ex-wife or estranged wife voted on that too, didn't she?
And so I think that, if you're looking at which direction the Republican Party is going, and long after Trump is out of the White House, this race is going to have a lot of say in that.
We will get to more on that with David Drucker of the Dispatch. Also talk about foreign policy. Will that intrude and make a difference for J.D. Vance or another Republican nominee for president? We'll get to that and more on The Medved Show with David Drucker.
Sign up today for our free weekly newsletter at michaelmedved.com.
It does look like we are going to be seeing an avoidance or an end to the brief 4-day partial government shutdown. I had thought when they were trying to find a a team name for the new version of the Washington Redskins. Instead of going with the Washington Commanders, they should have gone with the Washington Shutdowns, but they didn't. And we have David Drucker with us, senior writer for the Dispatch. David, is any of this politics and this 217 to 215 vote with which they are putting an end to this latest shutdown, is any of that going to make a difference, a big difference, you think, in the midterm elections coming up?
No, nobody's going to remember this even happened. I mean, it was a really brief. It was a really brief shutdown. It was notable because President Trump did everything he could to avoid it. He normally dives headfirst into shutdowns. He relishes the fight. This time he went out of his way to make a deal with Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate. Now, the next couple of weeks are critical because they still have to negotiate a compromise on funding for Department of Homeland Security. Democrats want a lot of changes to the president's interior immigration enforcement policies. The president is not going to want to give on that, but he seems keen to avoid a shutdown. And so, let's see what happens.
Okay, what is going to matter most in the upcoming midterm elections? Is it going to be the continued deportation, mass deportation that has been ordered by President Trump? Is it going to be the general feeling that our economy is not, despite Trump saying it's the greatest ever and it's the golden age, is not doing particularly well? Or is it going to be some issue of foreign affairs and America's position in the world? And by the way, what happens with Venezuela? We will get to all of that. But what is most likely to dominate the themes of the midterm elections coming up?
Well, look, I mean, affordability and the cost of living, whatever term you want to use. So it's not just inflation, but just the idea that people feel stretched, even people that feel like they're making a good enough living that they shouldn't be stretched. I think that continues to be the big issue. It usually is. The economy's always the big issue, but particularly when people aren't that thrilled with it. And even though the macro indicators show a lot of improvement, or at least a resilient economy, and this was the case under Joe Biden, where the macro indicators showed a resilient economy, people don't feel good about it. And the president, his habit is to talk about so many things and get involved in so much minutia that voters don't feel he's sufficiently focused on the economy. So it's a double whammy for him. I think that's the biggest problem Republicans face in the upcoming elections. Now, the manner, the tactics that the administration is using to achieve mass deportations are the problem, right? I mean, if the president were to instruct the Border Patrol and Immigrations and Customs Enforcement to go back to finding criminals in a very orderly and targeted way and deporting criminals, that is something people voted for in part and that they are on board with. But the idea that you're going to go from house to house asking people for their papers, particularly people that, basically aren't white, that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And it costs Republicans with Hispanic voters who are a key swing bloc. They're not Democrats who switched. They're not, Democrats who just got mad. They're really swing voters, and they're swinging the wrong way. And it's going to cause Republicans a problem with suburban voters who want safe communities, but don't like the idea that the federal government is acting outside of the bounds of the Constitution. So that, I think, secondarily, because of the visuals and the video that we have, is a problem. But it all begins and ends it all begins with the economy and how people feel about the economy.
I mentioned earlier that there was something of a surprise from your colleague, our colleague, James Carville, who has had some very harsh things to say about the direction of the Democratic Party. And he points out that he believes the best Democratic candidate for president, the one who could actually win, is J.D. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois. Your reaction to that, David Drucker?
I mean, Carville's forgotten more about politics than I'll probably ever learn. But, J.B. Pritzker is a boilerplate liberal who hasn't yet shown an ability to either stand up to the base of his party or sort of govern or talk about politics in a way that is sensitive to the cultural mores of swing voters in swing states and working class voters in swing states. And look, anybody can win, and who knows what kind of campaign he'll run. And he's certainly combative, and he's a fighter, and Democratic voters like that, and voters generally tend to like that. But people, one of the things that Trump was able to do versus Harris, and Trump was able to do versus Clinton, and that Biden was able to do versus Trump, was make working class voters and sort of, culturally conservative voters feel comfortable, and more comfortable than with the other guy, or at least as comfortable with the other guy. And, so let's see if J.B. Pritzker can do that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Carville points out is that he is famous for having won $2 million in cash playing blackjack at casinos. And not that J.B. Pritzker needed the money, he's a billionaire. But he pointed out that the American people like that, somebody who wins big bucks at blackjack. You agree?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Americans are hopeful, aspiring people that like winners. But they like people that they feel likes them, and that is the key. And people who are elected president usually are able to communicate to voters that they like them, that they care about them, and that they respect them. And whatever you think on the right of Barack Obama or other Democrats, or on the left of Donald Trump and other Republicans, that's one of the things that those winning candidates were able to accomplish in their presidential bids.
I appreciate your putting everything in such clear perspective. David Drucker is a senior writer for The Dispatch, an opinion contributing columnist for Bloomberg, and a MS Now news contributor. He's the author of In Trump's Shadow. And thank you again to David Drucker. As soon as you can, if you want to participate in more conversations like this one, subscribe at no cost to our Michael Medved official YouTube channel. It's easy to find and wonderful to subscribe. Hope you will join us.